Views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, you're encouraged to like and share them on Facebook. It's time for the Sue Ellen Sanders Show with your host, Sue Ellen Sanders.
Welcome to the Sue Ellen Sanders Show. I am so excited about the show today because I personally am going to learn a lot, and hopefully you will learn a lot too. What I do every weekend when we do this show, I try to bring you information about organizations and issues and opinions that I think, are good to know, or, maybe things about keeping your kids safe or keeping your family happy. And today's show is about keeping your workplace happy. So Wendy Conrad is here, and she is a happiness consultant with Your Happy Workplace. And, you think happiness consultant, that sounds like a little extra. And I mean extra in like that cool new way of saying extra.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yes. When I introduce myself as a workplace happiness consultant, people ears kind of perk up and they're like, ooh, what's that? Because I think a lot of times people can't put the words work and happy in the same sentence.
Exactly. That's
so that's starting to change, and I'm kind of helping businesses usher into the new, century of that being a thing.
And really, your information isn't just all touchy-feely, warm and fuzzy. It's fact-based.
Yes.
Which, people think, and again, I'm going to go back to that word happy. People think, it's not necessary for me to be happy. As long as I'm productive, as long as I'm getting the job done, as long as I'm respected. But all of those things kind of roll into that whole happy workplace thing.
Yes, I think when I say workplace happiness consultant, people have a vision in their mind of what that means before
Rainbows
I explain it to them. Yeah, so they think I come in a fairy outfit with a magic wand and I sprinkle fairy dust everywhere, and then my job is done. But
well, that would be nice if you could do that.
that's fun too.
Yeah.
But there's really more meat to what I do, and just like you said, there is a lot of facts and studies and research that I've done and read about that. There's really more to it than just, unicorns and rainbows.
Well, Wendy, let's back up just a little bit. How did you get started being a workplace consultant?
Interesting story. So I have spent the past 20 years working for 12 different small businesses. Some might call that job hopping. I call that in search of my dream job, quote unquote, but really what I was looking for was a good work culture, and it was hard for me to find. So at one of those experiences, I was in a very toxic workplace, and not just the run-of-the-mill, everybody has a bad boss story, but this was really toxic, and it was affecting my health, it was affecting my relationships, it was affecting everything in my life, really. So the tipping point came when I overheard my boss, through paper-thin office building walls, tell another employee that my quality of life didn't matter. And he used some expletives that are not suitable for radio.
Thank you for not sharing. Yes.
So that was
so your quality of life didn't matter. You were just an employee.
Just an employee, just a part in the machine. And there were a lot of things that happened, leading up to that point. But that was really the point where I was like, I can't, for my own mental health and physical well-being and, it's sacrificing my relationships, I can't be here anymore. And at that point, Your Happy Workplace was already kind of incubating as an idea, and I was already researching because I was asking myself the questions, does it have to be this way? does work have to, like you kind of touched on before, does work have to be a place where that we just go to and we're supposed to be miserable and we're supposed to not like our jobs and we're supposed to hate Mondays? Does it have to be that way? And why doesn't leadership get that if they just paid a little bit of attention to their team and their work culture, that it could really have a rippling effect on their whole business?
So let me tell you a quick story here. Not judging my workplace, which WPSL is my part-time workplace. I've been here for 20 years. But my full-time workplace is the Early Learning Coalition of St. Lucie County. And right after I was hired, my boss, the CEO, Tony Loop, who is a guy a little bit younger than me, more than a little bit, but anyhow, a guy I've known in the community for a long time, but had never worked for before. He took me around and introduced me to everybody in the office, or introduced everybody in the office to me. And he did not go around and say, this is Lena and she's a resource specialist. He said, this is Lena and she loves cats and rocks. And this is Karen and this is what she likes. And he had something about each team member that he referred to. And I walked away. I went home that night and I was doing a happy dance because I realized that I would be working for a guy, a boss, who saw beyond what his employees' job function was to who they were as a person. And he gave me little tidbits about each person. This is Chloe, her daughter is in the service. And, you know, there were just little things about everybody, so I would know, I would have a point to relate to them. And I just thought, and it's turned out that way. He's the type of boss who refers to the employees as a team, so they're team members. And I know there's a number of other places around here, like, for example, at the property appraiser's office, they're service professionals and they're team members. They're not employees. And they do that at some offices, but in general, when you feel like you're part of a team, you got a different attitude than when you feel like you're an employee.
That's interesting that you tell that story, because that one simple act almost gave you instantly a feeling of what your job experience was going to be there. Just that one thing kind of gave you insight into what the work culture was going to be.
It did. And it isn't really all unicorns and rainbows there.
No,
and
it never
everybody works hard, and there are conflicts and there are stressors and there are, I mean, we've got 25 people who work in an office. And so there's bound to be not everybody being on the same page at the same time. But at the end of the day, you know, we're respectful to each other and we're all part of a team. And we feel like we pull together as a team. We live and die as a team. We succeed as a team. And I'm really looking forward to finding out more information about how, you know, obviously what you do for your business is you go out and work for different organizations and businesses and give them consulting information. But I'm hoping that you'll be able to share some hints as well, kind of teasers you might call them, so people will see that some of the information that you would share is well worth listening to.
Absolutely. I like to say that the basis for any healthy work culture is three things. It's trust, it's listening, and it's fairness. So another misconception is people think, oh, happy work culture, well, I'll just buy everybody lunch every Friday, or I'll pay for their gym membership. And
That would be nice.
Those are great things, and those
Yeah.
can contribute certainly to a work culture that is healthy. But if it's not coming from a place of those three things, it's inauthentic, and your team's going to see right through it.
So the
And if
three
that's all you're
things-
doing, the three things are trust,
trust,
fairness,
fairness,
and listening.
and listening.
If you don't have those three things, you can buy all the free lunches you want, and you're still going to have issues in your work culture. And I love that you touched on the fact that the conflict, whenever you work with people, conflict is always going to exist. It's also, not only do I not wear a fairy outfit and wave a magic wand, I don't come in and eliminate conflict from your work culture, because that's not possible when you work with people. But it's about how you deal with the conflict and how you work together as a team and work through it.
And the interesting thing about the workplace environment is people bring their history with them to work every day. So whatever history they have or whatever life styles they're living with, whether they, their child kept them up all night because they're sick, you don't know that they're dealing with that. Or they may have, say they came from a very traditional work environment and very conservative work environment, and you are not a conservative person, then there might be clashes just because your work style is so different.
I love that you brought that up, because this is the first time in American history where there are 5 different generations in the workplace at the same time. So everywhere from Gen Z up to traditional, which are people who were born, I think, anywhere before 1946. So all of those different generations, like you said, have different things that motivate them, different experiences in their life. Maybe they grew up, during different times in our history that shape the way that they think about work and about life and about things that they want out of work and life. And so when you have all of those different, and people are different anyway, but when you add that there's 5 different generations, that throws in some extra differences that might not have been there in past history in the workplace.
Well, and you also, when I talk about history too, I'm talking about the fact that there are several generations of those 5 you mentioned where joking around in the workplace about different things was perfectly okay. And now you have to be really cautious about the things you say and the things you do, because they could be perceived as something you don't intend.
Right.
And, the bottom line is everybody has good intentions, but it's how the person you're talking to or dealing with sees it is going to color those intentions. They may not know what you meant, and then when you try to explain yourself, you make it worse.
Yeah.
So here's the question. And the other day when we emailed, I was at a wedding this weekend with a friend of mine who's an ophthalmologist, and a lot of his patients are older, and sometimes the visit to his office is their only outing that week. So my friend said that he had read an article about what they asked hospice patients, what they most regretted, what they missed, what they wished they'd done more of over their lifetime, and they said laugh. So he's a really deep thinker, my friend, and he's somebody who thought about this article he read, and he thought about the fact that a lot of his patients he may be the only outing they have that week. And he thought that not just him, but his office should be a happy place to come to, where it's a fun and rewarding thing, even if you're just getting your eyes checked.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I thought about it too. And every workplace is different. And it's like you said, it's a team, it's a family. We spend more time with these people than we do our own families. So there's no cookie cutter way to do things. But I think in every workplace, you can kind of pick out one or two people who are, let's just say maybe they were the class clown in high school.
Mm-hmm.
If you can identify those people and kind of form a committee where they can come up with creative ideas, because let's face it, not all of us are creative. Not all of us have an innate, funny bone and can come up with those things for our office.
Well, part of it could be posters in your office, things that you post. It could be something that's more situational than that you have to invent it.
Yeah.
But what my friend was concerned about was crossing the line of professionalism, not in a Me Too type of way,
Right.
but in a way where people questioned how good eye care they were getting because the people in the office were being genial and easy to get along with and funny.
That's interesting that you say that. And I'd be curious to know of what generation this
He's my
business owner
generation.
is. Okay.
Yep.
So that can kind of
yep.
speak to, that's a generational thing too. And I think people maybe, and I hate to generalize generations, but I'm going to do it anyway right now. People of older generations kind of, and I've got this reaction from people where when I say the words happy and work in the same sentence, I heard somebody say it today. It's not realistic to have fun at work. I disagree with that wholeheartedly.
And you think that's generational?
I think it can be. I think it can be, but it can also be a product of what our own experiences are and how we were raised.
But then you have the people on the other side of the spectrum, the ones who think that that the workplace is not really to work. My daughter has a coworker, and I can talk about a situation because she's in the D.C. area, and I know she's not listening and he's not listening. But they have the type of job that is computer-based and research-based, and they can actually get along putting minimal effort in. And her coworker, who sits in her view, watches videos on his phone for half the day and literally laughs out loud at them with his headphones on, and is kind of irritated when he has to do real work. And it just bothers her. I say, turn the other way. Don't look. Somebody else is he's not going to be able to do that for years on the end, but he's doing it now, and they're both the same generation. They're both in their 20s, and he is of the mindset that he's owed a job, and when he's sitting there, because he doesn't have to do hard work, that he won't do hard work.
Yeah, I think that's not necessarily a generational thing, and that can come in because I know a lot of people say, oh, millennials are lazy and this generation is this and this. I know some millennials who are some of the hardest workers that I've ever met. And I have to tell them, hey, you need to make some time for you. So there's always exceptions to the rule. But to speak to what you're saying, that can kind of come in with maybe take a look at what your hiring process is and what kind of questions you're asking, and maybe screen kind of that attitude out that way.
But what if you're the coworker and not the boss?
Well,
just look the other way?
For me, I always try and make sure I'm getting what I need to do done. And what they're doing is not my business. It's not my problem. It's not my business.
As her mother, that's what I told her. That was the advice
So,
I
mean,
gave her.
because it's like you said, that can't go on forever. That's not a sustainable behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's
when it comes time for promotions and raises and things like that, it's going to be pretty obvious who's doing work and who's not. But that also touches on kind of a generational thing, and I was talking to somebody about this today, where the younger generations are more, they're looking for more flexibility in terms of work hours, and some companies are moving more towards, task-based work, meaning as long as you get X,
You're
Y,
paid
and
for-
Z
yeah.
done, you can leave at 3:30. So that's kind of how that can vary from business to business depending on what kind of culture you have and how you want to structure things. But those are things that are now starting to happen in the workplace, where there is no traditional 9 to 5, 40 work week, because the younger generations are looking for more flexibility, and you can either go with those changes or resist them, but they're happening anyway.
What are some of the other trends that are happening in workplaces that you think are positive trends?
Well, I think the fact that people are kind of, I don't want to say demanding, but looking for positive work cultures. The job market today, there was a study done in 2018 where the job market was, for every open position, there were 7 people, qualified people to fill it. Now that number is more like 1 to 1. So as business owners, we need to compete in other ways, just besides just salary, because that's not the only motivator for people anymore. So now we need to think about work culture and stuff so we can attract and retain top talent to help us build our business. So flexibility in work schedules is certainly one. Looking at, like I mentioned before, investing in gym memberships and things like that. And brainstorming with your team about what motivates them.
Because what's important to them may not be something that you think of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because what works for this team may not work for this work culture
Yes.
over here. So going back to the 3 things, the trust, listening, and fairness, those things don't happen without communication. Communication is the center of everything. I really believe in transparency in the workplace as much as you can as the business owner or manager. Everybody doesn't need to know everything about the business, but I think transparency in the past has been something that maybe bosses or managers or business owners have resisted, in terms of telling the team what's going on with the company, where do we want to go, how are we going to get there, and brainstorming with them about what they want in a work culture.
And it was, because I've been in the workplace for a long time through a lot of different jobs, and I choose to think that it is selective too. And not a whole lot of other jobs, considering I've been in the workplace for 40 years. But there were certain things that I needed in the workplace, and one of them was respect. And it seems like it was something so little, but yet when it's not there, it's
It's monumental.
big. Yeah.
It's blatant. It's like
Yes.
a gaping chasm when it's not there. And it seems like when it's not there to the 10th degree.
Yeah.
So that has been my experience with a few places, and that's not something you can necessarily coach somebody on all the time. So a lot of what I do is working with people who kind of get that this is important for their business, and not just on a business standpoint, but as from a human standpoint, just being a good human. They want to do these things for their team because they care about them, but maybe they don't have the time, or they're too busy, or they're not sure how to communicate with the younger generations. And so it's really important to just communicate. That's the basis for everything, I think.
Okay, so let's get back to what you do, and when you go into a business, because you have different types of services that you might offer different types of businesses, and you also have some free things that anybody can sign up for.
Yes. On my website, if you sign up for my newsletter at yourhappyworkplace.com, I have a free downloadable guide called Find Your Person. And it's all about hiring and onboarding, because that's really where you set the tone. Like you said, your first day there, people were introduced with something personal about them. That's onboarding. That's an onboarding thing you can do. So this is a 10-tip guide for people who are business owners or in charge of hiring, for things that they can do to start that new employees or new team members experience right from the get-go, because that's what's going to make them a long-term employee and a productive employee and a happy employee.
And actually, when you have somebody there long term, it takes the stress off the people that have to train them, because there's nothing worse than having somebody in like 4 different people in the same position for that person who has to train them.
Yes, and employee turnover is expensive. And I think because it's not an invoice that you get or a bill that you get for your business, it's kind of like a, the cloud. My dad always says, "Where's the cloud?" It's not something that it's an exact dollar amount, but research that I've shown says anywhere from 3 to 6 months of that position's annual salary, that's how much it costs to hire somebody new and retrain them.
Well, and I don't know if that is just coincidental, but the 3 to 6 months is about the same as it takes a kid who is adjusting to kindergarten for the first time.
Yes. I like to think of life as just a big universal kindergarten.
Exactly.
And if we treated it like that, we'd all be, there's that book, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
Yes.
It's true. It's
It
totally
is.
true.
It is. So do you recommend that people do reading and research to find out how to improve their work situation, whether you're the boss or you're a team member?
It's definitely helpful. I have some articles on my website that I've written about it. There's definitely some books out there. The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker is a favorite one of mine.
I love Sean Aker.
He's got a TED Talk also, and amazing.
When I taught high school, which was actually one of my side gigs because I thought it looked like fun. We'll leave that there. I used, a lot of times I introduced different things with the TED Talk as an introduction to a subject. And I used Sean Aker's TED Talk where he talks about his sister and positioning things in her mind to have her feel that she was happy. And that is one of my all-time favorite TED Talks. And I still refer to it all the time because his sister's name is Amy. By the way, I've watched it so many times, and Amy fell off the top bunk because they were wrestling, and she hurt her arm. And he turned it around on her, and he said, well, whatever animal he called, a butterfly or whatever, you're flying, and you did a great job flying, and that's the way you need to look at it. And if you go tell mom and dad, so he played mind games with her, and this, I'm assuming he's a grown man, she's a grown woman now. Yeah. Actually, she's got a TED Talk. Did you know that?
No, I did
yes,
not.
Yes, and she talks about the fact that she's the Amy from Sean Aker's.
I'll have to check that out. I bet that's a good one.
But I haven't read his book. I probably should, but he was one of the first people that introduced me to the concept that being happy was something that could affect my everyday life and not just how I felt for the moment.
Yes, and I think it's a great book to read if you're asking yourself as a business owner or manager, why should I care about happiness in the workplace? Because that book is full of research that he's done that proves how happiness affects everything. It affects your team's production. It affects their engagement. It affects how long they're going to stay with you. It really, and like we've talked about, you can't be happy 100% of the time, and that's not the goal. The goal is to understand how these things and how the brain works and how happiness will ultimately affect your business and your customer service. And you mentioned the eye doctor. Just think about how just organically a patient's experience would change if everyone on his team, and I don't know what his work culture, they may be extremely happy there, but if everyone on the team were happy on a daily basis and were engaged, that would just organically make it a fun place for the patients to come.
It would, because they would feel the good energy in the air.
The juju.
The juju. Okay. So, that's something. There's some people that are just naturally in a good mood all the time, and there's some people that are not. And in my house, my husband and I refer to those as Eeyores from the Winnie the Pooh, where he says, yes, I have a tail, but it's not much of one. Well, goodness, Eeyore, you have a tail, though.
I've known some Eeyores.
Yes. So how do you deal with someone who is naturally pessimistic?
That's a great question. And there's an exercise that I do with clients where they think about their entire team and they divide them up into 4 quadrants, everywhere from completely engaged and efficient to not engaged and not efficient. And sometimes you kind of have to evaluate, because those not engaged and inefficient people are costing your business money and they're affecting your current work culture, because that doesn't just stay with that one person. It goes into everyone who they come into contact with, whether that be your customers or fellow coworkers. So you have to kind of think about, and that can be a like I mentioned before, something ineffective in your hiring process. And you can't, but sometimes people just have a bad day. You kind of have to evaluate that on a individual basis. But if you work on your work culture as a whole, that can also affect the Eeyores in the office and kind of lift them up. So everyone's an individual, but working on it as a whole can be infectious for everyone else too.
The thing that I think is interesting too, if you're somebody who has a lot of people call you on the phone and you're working on projects on your computer, say, or doing writing or putting things together, and that 10th phone call, you've just had it, and you pick up the phone and you say, good afternoon, this is Sue Ellen, and you're kind of feeling like, you don't say it, but you're thinking, what do you want from me? But that 20th person, they don't know that you had 19 other phone calls that day.
Yeah. That's where the work culture as a whole comes into play. Because if you're at a place where you're not feeling respected, and, there's so many layers to work culture where you're now having to deal with customers multiple times a day, and you get to that 20th person and you're just kind of beat down from all angles. But if you're working in a place that's inspiring to you and that you can go to coworkers and kind of vent, or you can go take a walk, or you have somebody coming in doing yoga or something inspiring, then it kind of makes those experiences better. And I always say, happiness is infectious. So if you kind of remember that, you can kind of guide that person, and it's not always going to happen, but you can kind of guide the bad phone call and turn it into a good one just by your own attitude.
And really, it's not that the phone call was bad.
Yeah.
It was just kind of my attitude was not good answering it.
Yeah.
And, especially when you're in a position like when you're at the front desk and you're the greeter, or you're the operator and everybody's got to go through you. And sometimes those positions seem to get the least amount of respect because they're the low positions on the work totem pole, but yet they have the most public contact. So, and I know that there are programs to train people on how to answer the phone, how to deal with different situations, how to greet people. But you can't fundamentally change the way somebody is. You have to, I would think you would have to hire somebody that fits the need that you have for being that first contact.
Yes. There's a saying out there that says hire character, train skill.
Ooh.
And the receptionist position is a great example of that because not everybody on the planet can be trained to be a receptionist. And you're right, that's the front lines of your business, especially if you have a retail space where you have people coming in all day. That's the face of your business. And so you have to make sure that you're hiring a specific personality for that. I couldn't do it. I'm not that patient. It takes a lot of patience to be able to, like I said, kind of gear their experience by your demeanor. And so it really, there's a lot of personality tests out there that you can use that can kind of guide you into what kind of personality you should be hiring for a reception position. But yes, I believe that is a great example of a position that you need to hire a character and then train the skills.
Because the skills are pretty basic.
Yeah.
But the character is going to shine through no matter what.
Absolutely.
So, well, that's interesting. So what are some other suggestions that you would have for people who are, say you're in a workplace where you don't have control over a lot of situations. Say, for example, you're a teacher at school and you've got to follow the administration's rules, and you're also answerable to your students and their parents.
I think the biggest tip for people in those kind of positions where they're not making decisions necessarily about what their work culture is going to be is to form a support system with your coworkers. That's the way you're going to survive and share resources and talk about specific situations and challenges that you're having and kind of brainstorm ideas with them about how to do something differently or do it better or just cope with whatever work culture you might happen to have to deal with.
So we talked about what makes a work environment healthy. So what makes a work environment toxic?
Ooh.
And how do you know when it's not something you can fix?
That's a great question. Well, how you know it's toxic is if you maybe see a lot of whispering going on in the office, or you can just kind of get a vibe from people if they're unhappy. If people right at 5 o'clock, they can't wait to clock out, or they're right at 9 o'clock, if those happen to be the hours, if they're maybe taking long lunches, or there's a lot of sick days being used. That's a great indicator if you're not having a good work culture. And can it never be fixed? I don't believe that. I mean, sometimes there may have to be some radical changes made in terms of team members. Because like I said, if you have one person sometimes it can be one person who's toxic, and it's kind of permeating into everything else. And you may not be able to see it clearly until that person is gone. And then when they're gone, you can be like, oh, wow, what a huge difference.
Like when they're on vacation and all of a sudden you notice everyone is breathing and happy.
Yeah. So I believe everything is fixable, but whether or not the people who make the decisions are willing to make those big changes, that's really the question.
Is it a matter sometimes of readjusting someone's position, maybe moving them to a different position or a different team?
Absolutely. And that's another tip I have for people to kind of improve their work culture is to ask them on a regular basis, everybody in the team, whether you're the manager or the owner, how can I help you do your job better? If you just ask that question of the team on a regular basis, I'd be surprised if you don't see immediate results.
Just because they're happy that you asked. So how can I help you, or how can ABC Company help you do your job better?
It's so powerful. Like you said, it says so many things to them. It says, I care. It says, I care about your job, what you're doing. But also asking them questions like, what would you like to see happen here? What are ideas that you have? Listening, that's part of the listening component, and communicating. It's so important. It's validating people. People, listen, we all want the same things. We all want to be seen and heard. And that goes for in the workplace, in life, everywhere. And just asking that one question says to them, I'm listening to you. I hear you. But you have to act on the information after that. You can't just ask the question and then say, oh, I did my good deed for the day. You have to then act on it.
The other thing I noticed, though, when we were talking about good intentions, is I've been in workplaces before where people ask me how my day was or how my weekend was, and you could see that they didn't really care to hear the answer. They were already
glazed over.
Yeah, glazed over, not paying attention by the time that you finished your answer. And so you kind of cut your answer short because you realized they didn't really care.
It's what I call a nicety.
Okay.
They're being nice.
Yep.
By asking you, but then they don't care about the answer.
Yes. So the key to asking that question or any question like that is to take a beat and listen to the answer. So when you talk about listening as one of the main things that you need to have a happy workplace, it could mean as much as listening to their answer of a question you're asking.
Yeah. And not just listening, but then using that information to make some kind of change, if that's, what the goal is.
Does it have to be a big change?
No. It can be as simple as, what can I do to make your job better, make you do your job better? Well, I've been having this issue with the program that we use, and it keeps crashing on me, and they might have had that issue for weeks, and they're not communicating it to anybody because maybe no one's asking.
Right.
You get the IT guy in there, fix it that day. That is something simple and small that can have a big impact on so many levels because they feel seen and heard, and then you acted on what they're telling you.
What are some other things that people can do to just make their day a better day at whatever workplace they're working at?
I think I'm always going to go back to communication and always asking questions. I think involving the team in any kind of changes that you're making, and they don't have to be big changes, but any kind of project or changes that you're doing within the company, involving everybody on some level, in that it gives them a connection to the mission. And that can be a huge motivation for people to feel engaged in their job. And telling them why. There's another great saying that says managers tell people what to do, but great leaders inspire people what to do. So if you're communicating to them why they're doing X, Y, and Z and what the main purpose is of the business, then that's going to be a huge motivator for them to be engaged, come up with creative ideas of maybe how to do things better. It all comes back to communication.
What if you're dealing with somebody who's set in their ways and they're going to do what they're doing no matter what you say? How do you handle that?
That's a tough one. And like I said, sometimes hard decisions have to be made if it's affecting the rest of the team and it's affecting what the goals are for the business. All you can do is create the environment that's healthy and that's going to be inspiring. And then ultimately, it's up to each individual how they're going to perform on their job. So if you have somebody who isn't, going with the flow in terms of what the business's goals are and mission is, then you need to maybe reevaluate their position there. And you brought up something earlier about switching up people's maybe roles within the business, because a lot of times we might hire somebody for something in particular, but then we notice that they have particular skills that might be better suited to another position. or we hear that they have maybe an outside interest that involves skills that might be suited to another position, or we're asking them questions like, what's your plan for working here in this company? And they say, oh, well, I'd love to be promoted to this position, or I really, I've been talking to Jane about what she does, and that really interests me. Placing people where not just their skills are, but where their interests are, can also be huge in creating better engagement and better production for people.
The other thing that I realize, having been around for a while and been in different workplace situations, is you can't change somebody that doesn't want to change. It's the same thing as I remember my sister when she first got married. She was talking about some of the things that she didn't like about her fiance. Actually, it was before they got married. She said, well, but we'll be able to change that after we get married. And that marriage lasted about 4 years.
As someone who's been married for 16 years, I laugh at that notion.
But it's this really similar situation with coworkers or with employees, that they've got to want
That's
and see the need for the change.
Fantastic analogy, because a lot of times we do get into relationships and we think, well, I don't think I can live with that, but it'll change. It'll get better. It'll change. And that's where, again, I say you have to think about the overall culture. And sometimes there's that one person who, you can, and like I said, you can't, as much as you want something to happen, relationship or workplace, you can't will it into being. So you can only, you're only in control of your own thoughts and actions. So you can create the workplace that's going to be encouraging and inspiring, but sometimes that's not going to happen for everyone.
One more quick story about when I was head of an office of a nonprofit organization. I had 6 employees, and it was a small group. And one day it was a holiday. For some people, it was what we call a banking holiday, but our office was open. But nobody was calling. Nobody was doing anything. It was a nonprofit organization. So I said at around 11, I said, we're going to close the office at noon. And 4 of those employees were as excited as they could be. And they just couldn't wait. They were cleaning everything up, getting ready to go home. And I walked by and I heard that 5th employee on the phone to her boyfriend going, can you believe it? I had to get up and now she's giving us half the day off. And I wasn't like taking the time off their time card or anything. They were getting it, but she was angry about being able to leave work early because it was not something she had planned for. And I think that is when I first realized that there's sometimes, no matter what you do, you can't win.
Yeah, you can't please everybody. And that's so true in the workplace, because you're dealing a lot of times with so many people now in so many generations. They've got so many different things going on, so many experiences that have shaped who they are. And no one thing is going to work for everyone.
Well, Wendy, let's share some. We only have about 4 more minutes left in the show. Let's share some more information about your website and your organization so people can get information. And when I say this, I'm not trying to push Wendy's services at all. That's not why I asked her to be on the show. It's just that some of the things that you say and that you have on your website and that are part of your newsletter that goes out to people who sign up for free are things that you might not think of otherwise. So let's let everybody know how to get that information.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, everybody can go to my website, which is yourhappyworkplace.com. And there you can sign up for the newsletter and get that free hiring and onboarding guide that I talked about earlier. You can also read, I have an articles section there that talks about all things workplace happiness. I also have a workshop coming up in the end of this month, February 28th, at CoLab in Vero, which if you've never been there, it's a beautiful co-working space. The title of the workshop is called Workplace Happiness for Professional Women, What's Holding Us Back? And we talk about things like imposter syndrome, being a people pleaser, and how those things show up for you at work. So all of that information for that workshop is on the
website
as well.
And I will say also that there's the link where you can sign up, put your email in, and get
the newsletter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy, even though you mentioned the end of February workshop, this is probably a show that we're going to play again. So if you're listening to this show and that workshop date has already passed, you can still go look on the website because there's probably something else coming around the corner.
Yes, I do plan on doing that workshop in St. Lucie and Martin counties as well. I don't have dates for those yet, so there's always going to be something going on. I've got a lot of things in the works right now. So yeah, always check the website for events coming up.
And then your business is not a one-size-fits-all. So
No,
you
definitely
have
not.
a different plan for different types of
Absolutely,
businesses.
because every team is different and it's made up of different people.
It is. So it's really interesting to see how, there's a little bit of warm and fuzzy. That's part
Yes.
of what you do. And you are the type of personality who would wear a dress with toucans on
Yes,
it.
I am.
So we love her toucan dress. If you're listening to this on the radio, you need to check on YouTube on demand just so you can see Wendy Conrad's dress.
Thank you.
And I love the fact that you started this business in search of how to help others find that happy workplace that was elusive for you.
Yes, I really think a lot of business owners want to do this for their teams, but either they're too busy or they're not sure how to communicate to all the different generations. They're not sure how to make it happen. So that's where I come in.
So one last piece of advice for my eye doctor friend. Can you combine humor in the workplace?
Absolutely. But like you
just have
said,
to
it's
figure out
custom to your team.
Yeah.
My suggestion for him is to find one or two people on the team that already have humor naturally and have them create some ways
Yes,
that they
create
can incorporate it.
the humorous workplace.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to the Sue Ellen Sanders Show. My guest has been Wendy Conrad with yourhappyworkplace.com. So you can reach her on her website or you can call the station. We'll hook you up with it. So have a great day. We'll see you next time with more.
Archives of the Sue Ellen Sanders Show can be found on YouTube under WPSL TV. Check the schedule at WPSL.com to find out when you can hear the Sue Ellen Sanders Show on Saturdays and Sundays right here on WPSL.